This is the affirmative action ruling
Well,
from the Supreme Court.
I mean, I think some universities were using these policies to discriminate against Asian students and other kinds of students. So, pick your discrimination. Who do you want to be discriminated against? Wouldn't the fair way to do it would be to say, we're going to look at everybody's test scores, we're going to look at everybody's applications, and we're going to do it agnostic of race, and we're going to let the most talented and the most accomplished students come to our universities. You mentioned the Supreme Court ruling, by the way, on affirmative action, which I do believe was a seminal moment because it reminded me when it happened that a vast majority of Americans do not want affirmative action. They do not believe in these forced racial preferences. And even a majority of African Americans agreed with the ruling at the time. And so when some people, often accuse Republicans are on the right, but I think a lot of Americans all across the spectrum look at this and say, I want to rise and fall based on my own talent and my own hard work. I don't want to rise and fall based on the pressures being put on me by people who don't know how much work I'm putting in.
Let's talk about.
So DEI strikes again. So as you saw from the CNN panel, that was an interesting conversation that happened. It was a 1-minute clip that I showed you of Scott Jennings pretty much pushing back on this whole DEI narrative. And as a black person, American, I always thought that DEI, this is the words from Thomas Sowell, is racism under new management. Like, think about it. You think this person is incapable of doing anything for themselves because of the way they were born, and you believe that your skin color is somehow an advantage versus a disadvantage. And when people talk about systematic racism, white supremacy, I always laugh because I'm like, that's a figment of your imagination. Show me where in the system, based on my skin color, I can't do something. It restricts me in some way. It's just a belief system at this point. And at this point, and this is me talking to black liberals, black Democrats, progressives who try to use moral virtue to defend us, and in return they gain political weight and power. Oh, the system's unfair. And I think this is this very naive way of thinking. And I agree wholeheartedly with Scott Jennings. I was raised that to be so good that they can't deny you. That if I fail is due to my lack of ability. And if I succeed, it's due to my ability. I don't want no one sitting here trying to take credit. Oh, if it wasn't for DEI, you wouldn't be able to do anything. I'm tired of that narrative. And DEI just got exposed where they saw law school students saw a steep decline in Hispanic students to 39 students, or 6.9%. This fall from 63 students, or 11% of the total in 2023. And they're trying to say, oh my God, look, black representation is falling. And I'm like, no, this is a good thing. Because those black people who made it, they made it off of their abilities and not given an advantage based on their skin color. This was what white privilege was about, right? White privilege was someone got something because their skin color was at advantage. And it didn't matter about the abilities of somebody. Because someone was white and another person was black, the white person got the opportunity. And we moved away from the model of equal opportunities, because if you look in 2024, you can't name me an opportunity that me or any black person can take a hold of. And I talked about this mentality in the black community, this entitlement to outcomes. And then I'm going to go to this next clip that I believe is very important for many black people to see this. Because I always talk about there's two visions of black America. Conservatives believe in one vision and liberals believe in the other vision. And if you see this clip, you'll know which one's which. But I want to leave it off with here is that I always grew up and I always believed that your behaviors decide your outcomes. If you have a negative outcome, I can tie it to the behavior or some skill or some decision you made that gave you the outcome. Not racism, not external factors, internal factors. Because at the end of the day, your internal decision makings, the decisions that you choose to do, the path you decide to do, you choose, determines more of your outcomes than your skin color ever can in 2024. But we still have people itching and complaining about their skin color being a setback. Oh, it's institutional racism. How come institutional racism didn't stop me? What makes me so different from you? Aren't we both black? The only thing that's different is the mentality. I don't subscribe to the logic that racism can stop me. And that's the difference. A man who believes he can and a man who believes he can't are both usually right. I digress. Let's check out this clip, and then I'll follow up with another segment I think you guys need to see.
There are basically two narratives that people concerned about persisting racial inequality can adopt. One of them is a biased narrative. Racism and white supremacy have done us wrong. We won't be able to get ahead until they relent. We have to continue to press for reform of American society, of white American society, to that end. But the other narrative, which I take very seriously and for which I think there's a ton of evidence, I'm calling the development narrative. I'm saying that you have to look at the processes by which people come to acquire skills, traits, habits, and orientations that lend themselves to successful participation in American society. And to the extent that African American youngsters, too many of them, certainly not all, are not having the experiences and being exposed to the influences and having the benefit of the resources that foster and facilitate human development, they are not developed, that they're not achieving their full human potential. That is basically the cause for the gaps that we're seeing. These two different orientations or predispositions point in two very different directions in terms of intervention and remedy.
You guys already know where I'm at. I'm at the development kind of narrative. Like, end of the day, disparities doesn't prove racism. It doesn't. All it proves is that black people make different decisions than white people. And if you make different decisions than other groups of people, then you'll have different outcomes. For example, do you know that the average age in the black community is around 30 years old? The average age in the white community is 55 years old. And, common sense will tell you that older Americans tend to make more money than younger Americans. So if older Americans tend to make more money than younger Americans, and white people as a population have a higher average age than the black community, could that not explain the wealth gap between black and white people? But these DEI people, these people who push DEIs, they want to complain about, oh my God, we need racial discrimination against white people because it cures past discrimination. And I always go, no, DEI will create more discrimination. And that's the reality. The fact that black people tend to get into Ivy League colleges with lower test scores compared to their peers of the same score shows you that the color of your skin, if you're being black in academia, is not an advantage. Before the Supreme Court ruled against this racist standard, and it is racism. But before I go into why I believe DEI is racism, actually DEI is a prime example of systematic racism. Because I always admit in my comment section, if a liberal, progressive, Marxist can show me empirical evidence of systematic racism, I'll stand with them and call it out and say, yes, this is discrimination. This should not be the case. But I found it. It's called DEI. And the progressives don't want to stand with me. They don't want, because the reality is DEI was never about equality. It was always about getting your specific group privilege, power, advantage, leverage. And this is what I'm talking about. Now, when I saw this about the racial quota, I looked through the comment section in Scott Jennings and I found one that stuck out to me so much so that I had to reply myself. So let's read it together. That would make sense, Scott, if everyone was playing on an equal playing field. But we know that in America, that is not the case. Let me change this for you, sir. In the world, that's not the case. A black kid born on a continent of Africa will not have the same opportunities and lifestyle as me being born here in the United States of America. But we're both black. So what's the difference? Our location. Oh, okay. And here's how I rebutted to this guy, because I found it asinine. I found this, this guy looks old, right? He looks pretty old, right? And he's so naive. Like, the naivety of this idea. Like, I asked him this question, and he's probably never going to answer this, but this is a question I'll pose to people who disagree with me. Tell me when in history of mankind that there was ever a time where people had an equal playing field. I'll wait. Some people are born smarter than others. Fact. More talented than others. I meant to put talented, but more talented than others. Your statements sound naive and impractical. DEI is racism under new management, nothing more. Tell me I'm lying. Let me know in the comment section. Y'all gonna actually comment, you're lying, Kenny. But this is the reality of DEI. DEI is systematic racism. You're giving disproportional outcomes to a group of people based on the color of their skin. Black people today has never experienced slavery. Black people today have never experienced racism at the same level as Martin Luther King and them. The closest thing to racism that modern day Black people of 2024 experience is someone calling them the N-word, someone not liking them. Prejudice is enough. I mean, we all have prejudices. Some have prejudice against conservatives. Some have prejudice against Christians. But that seems to be more tolerated than racism. And the idea that I'm trying to push back on is that if you accept racism for some, you have to accept racism for all. Either racism is equivalently bad or it's good. You can't make it okay to be racist to some people and not racist to other people. Either we disavow racism in all its forms or we don't. And DEI is exposing how, in reality, it proved Thomas Sowell right all these years. And this is the kind of wisdom that I believe that we are missing in our politics. We need more thinkers like Thomas Sowell, because Thomas Sowell been called this out. DEI is racism under new management.
And this popped up on my timeline earlier, which honestly just floored me. Take a look. Here we have medical school acceptance rates, the percentage of students accepted, then divvied up by race, and then of course accounting for their academic achievement. And instantly, I don't even really need to say it now, do I? We can all see it. This is systemic racism visualized. The lower the test scores get, the more you start to see the disparity. The more it seems that white and Asian students are strictly being discriminated against. I mean, in a fair, in a just world, in a non-racist world that the left is always dreaming about, I feel like the general body of the chart would probably look more something like this. I drew this little red ramp, let's call it. You know, in a just world, all races would be achieving relatively equally. I'm sure there could be some sociocultural differences, but let's just say for conversation's sake, in a utopian world where we truly moved beyond race, that's what you'd expect to see. That would be true progress. Everybody performing around the same trends, around the same line. But instead, no, we have this. And clearly we've identified something here. I think it's this portion. We just highlight it right over here. I think we've finally found it. What the left's been going on and on and on for years, but has never actually been able to define or explain. They've never been able to actually find it and show it. Systemic racism. Here it is for everybody to see. This is the academic institution's systemic system of discrimination against white and Asian students.
You notice that? So if you look at the graph again, maybe I'll put a screen here. You could see that Blacks with way lower scores are it's almost like Asians have to score on average higher than Black students to get to get admitted to Harvard Law School at the same rate as a lower scored Black person. Isn't that not systematic racism? If we had flipped the graph and they showed a bunch of white people having those disproportionate outcomes, that white person with a low MCA score or whatever the bar score is got into the college at a disproportionate rate compared to a Black person with a higher score. Black people used to have this narrative where you had to work twice as hard as a white student to get the same outcome. Now it seems like in this current age of DEI, a white and Asian student have to work 3 times as hard to get the same outcome as a low performing Black person. How times have changed, isn't it? And one thing I like to point out is about Black culture, because I believe culture has the biggest impact and influence on a community's outcome than systematic or any racism, because your culture is an incentive structure. Show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. If I put an incentive where I expect Black women to get pregnant at a certain age, to act a certain way, and these behaviors are not conducive to building wealth, right? Passing down, creating generational wealth, building generational wealth, passing on wealth, not passing on good financial habits. Because if you show me your habits, I can show you your future. If you have a bad habit of spending money on liabilities, there's no way you can generate wealth. And the biggest critique I have to Black people, Black Americans that believe in racism, or they believe that they should have equity or equal outcomes, is how can you expect to have equal outcomes when you're not even making the same decisions as another group of people? And the funny thing about Black people too, they like to pretend that, oh, Americans are the ones that focus on race. Americans are the ones that focus on race. No, it's Democrats that focus on race. It's progressives that focus on race. It's leftists that focus on race. Because end of the day, your race doesn't define anything about you. Your habits, your decisions does though. And if you have this entitlement where you believe that you're entitled to the same outcomes as someone else, but you don't even do the same efforts, you don't apply yourself the same way, how the hell you expect to have the same outcome? If someone decided, hey, I got $10,000 and I decided to invest my $10,000 in the stock market, and you decided to spend your $10,000 on a chain, the newest, or some fancy liability, and in 5-10 years, that person ends up becoming a millionaire and you end up being broke, can you get mad at the white person because he decided to use his money for a long term? He sacrificed the short term for the long term. Delayed gratification is the number one indicator of whether or not you're going to be successful in life. And in the black culture, sorry, I got to call it out. I got to call a spade a spade. In the black culture, there's an incentive for instant gratification. Just based on that alone decides disproportional outcomes. And I always say it, data doesn't prove a narrative. Data only proves the results. And the results only shows or highlights the outcomes produced by a group of people. So when these people say, oh, black people give decline loans more than white people. Well, if you look at black banks, where I eliminated racism, the idea that racism plays a factor, black banks are more likely to deny black people than white banks, white-owned banks, however you categorize that. Make that make sense. How can that be? Because it's not about racism. And this is the focus that I try to get black culture to pull out of their heads. And I think the true generational curse, if I were to say anything in the black community, what's really holding the black people back, why black people can't seem to be competitive in the academic, social economic sphere, is the mentality that black culture incentivized into the black community. This victim mentality, this I am owed something, I am entitled to something. When in reality, you're owed nothing. You're entitled to nothing. You're not entitled to another group of people to do something in your best interest. That don't make any damn sense. Inequalities are not necessarily inherently evil. The context around it could be another discussion. But the point that one group has different outcomes than the other group is not inherently bad. But you have to answer the question why you have those outcomes. And blaming a system on an imaginary boogeyman to excuse yourself of responsibility takes away your power to do something about it. And this is the doom loop that the black community is stuck on. And I'm just tired of people tolerating that. I'm not going to tolerate that anymore. A lot of black people in my comment section, especially those who disagree with me, will try to make excuses. Oh, systematic racism is a thing. You don't know what you're talking about. You're ignorant as hell on this topic. I don't give a damn. Because the reality is, the only one stopping you from reaching your goals, proving people wrong, is you. And everything else is just an excuse. Whoever you blame is the one that has the power. I'm just being honest. You're responsible for you. You're the common denominator in every situation, every job interview, every negotiation. You're the common denominator. So that means it serves you well. It's a better use of your time to focus on what you could do better to get a better outcome than try to find someone to blame. And for too long in black culture, they have incentivized a mentality where they teach their kids to find something to blame, and they never have the time or the character, essentially, to look at themselves and see how they can maximize what they have, to optimize for their outcomes. Instead, they're looking for something to blame. And this is the reality of the black culture. And this is why y'all fall behind. This is why y'all at the bottom. Because y'all don't want to develop the community. You just want to blame something else. But I digress. I know I was supposed to go on this rant, but I think it's enough. I think that's enough. Like, I'm honestly tired of the boo-hoo whining and crying, as a shout out to Black Conservative will say. And these liberals, these race hustlers, they know they're getting rich off this mentality. This is the reality. They want to keep racism on. Racism was on life support in 2007, and they bring it right back. Why? Because it suits them. It's more convenient to black people's ego to blame the white man than to blame themselves. And that's the reality of all this stuff. But whether you agree or disagree, let me know in the comment section what you think. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Appreciate you guys watching to the end of the video. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.